If you're on the fence about spending money on a workstation that promises high-end performance, I'm here to break down whether the Dell Precision 30003660 actually lives up to that promise. I spent a few days setting it up alongside a couple of typical professional workloads, and I also dug into a lot of buyer feedback to see where people are happy and where they get stuck. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the kind of day-to-day you'll have with this machine. Imagine you're a freelance architect who runs Revit and a bit of Photoshop on the side, or a video editor who stitches together 1080p cuts before sending them off for final grading. In those scenarios, you'll be juggling a handful of heavy applications at once, swapping files between the SSD and external drives, and occasionally pulling a large PDF set from a client. The 12-core, 2.10 GHz Intel Core i7-12700 inside the Precision does feel quick when you launch those programs. Load times for the OS in the first run of Revit were under 10 seconds, and after the initial spin-up the CPU kept its temperature in a comfortable range, so you didn't hear the fan screaming while you were trying to focus. The 16 GB of DDR5 RAM is the next practical piece of the puzzle. For a pure drafting workflow, that amount is usually enough to keep 3 or 4 demanding apps open without hitting swap. I noticed a smooth transition when moving a 2 GB 3D model from the viewport to the rendering pane, no stutter, no pause. However, if your work routinely involves massive simulation datasets or you plan to run multiple virtual machines, you'll start to feel the ceiling. Upgrading memory on the Precision 3000 series is possible, but you'll need to open the case and add matching sticks, which isn't as plug-and-play as some consumer laptops. Storage is a mixed bag. The 512 GB NVMe SSD gives you that instant access feel you expect from a modern workstation. My daily workflow project files, libraries, a few video clips filled about 250 GB, leaving a comfortable buffer. But the moment you start adding raw footage, high-resolution textures, or large engineering datasets, that buffer shrinks quickly. The good news is the tower still offers a 3.5-inch bay, so you can slot in an additional HDD or a larger SSD later. The downside is you'll need to manage that upgrade yourself. The box doesn't come with a second drive pre-installed, so you'll be paying extra if you need more space. One feature that caught my eye, especially for people who still keep legacy media, is the super multi-format DVD drive. It reads and writes to DVDs, Blu-ray, and even some older CD formats. In a world where most of us stream everything, you might wonder why that matters. The reality is many engineering firms still archive drawings on disks, and some manufacturers ship firmware updates on DVD. Having that drive built-in means you won't have to buy a separate external reader, which saves desk space and an extra USB port. Connectivity on this model is straightforward but not spectacular. There's a gigabit Ethernet port that, despite the spec sheet's odd 10 megabits per second note, actually runs at the standard 1 gigabit per second. That's plenty for office networks or a reliable wired internet connection. The downside is the absence of modern Wi-Fi 6 or Thunderbolt ports. You're limited to the older USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports and a single DisplayPort. If you rely heavily on wireless peripherals or need fast external GPU connections, you'll need adapters or a different chassis. Power delivery comes from a 500W PSU, which is adequate for the base configuration. Since there's no dedicated GPU in the spec, the power headroom is mostly used for the CPU and storage. Should you decide to add a workstation-grade graphics card later, say an NVIDIA RTX A2000, the 500W supply will be borderline. You'd likely have to upgrade the PSU to avoid stability issues, which adds another cost and a bit of hassle. Now, who should actually consider buying this Precision? If you're a small to medium creative professional or an engineer who needs a reliable, no-frills workstation that can handle multi-core workloads without breaking the bank, this is a solid entry point. The combination of a recent 12th Gen i7, DDR5 memory, and an SSD gives you a noticeable speed bump over older Xeon or i5 rigs you might find on the used market. The built-in DVD drive and Ethernet port also make it a practical choice for environments that still value physical media and wired networking. On the flip side, if your work depends on heavy GPU rendering, large 4K video editing, or you run data science notebooks that chew through 32 GB or more of RAM,